Good. I really liked the point that you made about relying on these colonies for resources and building up their own trade. And the idea would be that if you're in England and you're relying on your colonies, then in turn you don't have to necessarily trade with a Spain or a France per se. Let me hear one more about this overall effect or impact. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with both like what they said, but also I think that it in the actual colonies, it just made mercantilism more separate, I guess. They were all like competing for resources and they weren't like trading within the colonies, they were more trading back to the motherland, which kind of made it like kind of created tension between the colonies and their economies. So, yeah.
Yeah, great point, and something that we'll see developing even further next week when we have more these colonies that are developing along the eastern seaboard of the Atlantic there, and you have certain products like you mentioned, a tobacco which is going to benefit a Virginia or a Maryland, highly sought after, which maybe more so than other products. So very good point there. Number two, did the effect differ according to which European nation owned the colony? Eleanor, get us started with this one.
Well, I kind of talked about like the enclosure movement, like how they were trying to get more land so they could have more wool to trade with. So that really affected like the people who were working on that land because they lost their jobs and yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Kate, how about you?
I kind of wrote about how for like the English and the Spanish especially, like the middle class benefited from mercantilism while the lower class didn't.
Okay, yeah, very good point that depending on which nation was colonizing, it may have benefited a different class or group of people. Let's go to so speaking of, the different countries, let's go to the next one. This was talking about how did how did mercantilism contribute to power rivalries among the European nations? Ramaya, you want to get us started there?
I said that mercantilism contributed to power rivalries among the European nations because each nation was trying to maximize exports and minimize imports, making it hard for the nation to become wealthy.
Perfect. Charlie, how about you?
Yeah, mercantilism contributed to power rivalries because it was kind of like an arms race, but instead of weapons, they were each trying to get like the highest value. As I said, people stopped looking for more for individual wealth, and it was more of a race for your country to be the wealthiest.
That's a great analogy. Are you going to be upset if I borrow that one? I'm putting it down in my notes, like an arms race.
I don't care.
Okay. Do I need to trademark it? Do I need to put CB so that next year when this comes up, I say, according to Mr. Charlie Baker, this is like an arms race. You are all familiar with an arms race. Do I need to trademark it for you so you get a little cred? No? All right. You're good. Okay. All right. Hey, and I don't need any credit either. If any of you want to share any of my analogies or goofy stories, feel free. All right. I don't need the credit, right? I'm not like that. Something else there for number three. Carly.
For number three?
Yeah, sorry. I meant, I know it's a different number in the book. I'm going off the typed ones that I did. The power rivalries. What did you say?
Well, like I said that, like, yeah, like kind of agreeing with Charlie, like now they like are definitely competing for like to have the highest wealth for like out of all the other nations around them, and like definitely competing for better resources, I feel like. So because if you have like the higher your wealth is, then the weaker your rivals are to you. So
Glad you mentioned that. I know that was a key concept about like if the wealth of England increases, then that in turn would then be decreasing the wealth of a Spain or a France. And I think part of that is the fact that, wealth is viewed as being finite at that time, meaning limited. And so one true way to measure a country's wealth was with one resource in particular. So anybody give me a thumbs up or a hand who wants to respond to that one resource that was extraordinarily valuable to determine wealth. we don't really see it that much anymore in terms of, assessing wealth, because we're looking at cash. So somebody give me a thumbs up here or a hand. What was that one resource that really determined wealth for a nation? Looking for a thumb or a hand. Okay, Devin, go ahead.
Is it gold?
Yeah, absolutely. Gold and silver, but primarily gold. That was what was seen as really assessing your wealth as a nation. So let's go to the last question. And that was looking at mercantilism as a nation's driving economic force has largely given way to economic globalization. That is increased interdependence of nations' economies. So let's look at it another way. Could mercantilism actually exist in the world today, right? I mean, we are in a global economy, so think about that and why that's the case. Let me start with Annika. Why don't you start with that one?
With number 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yep.
I think that it led to interdependence in nations' economies, because like they traded with each other, they needed the different like resources that other countries had, so then they had to depend on each other instead of just depending on themselves because they didn't have enough resources. But then they also had, it was a race, so it wasn't a whole world like depending on each other, but just a couple nations depending on themselves.
Okay, excellent point. Cordelia, what do you say?
I said something similar. It just allowed many nations' economies to grow independently, and it kind of like allowed them to not depend on one another for resources.
Annie Wilson.
I said something different. I said that since the money is only flowing inwards to towards the empire, then it doesn't allow many services for and like spreads of technology and kind of like new ideas and trading different resources.
Johnny.
I said that since mercantilism forced the European nations to spread their control of colonies through the New World, and there's only limited resources and land to conquer, that they were forced to trade with each other because not one country can get everything.
Which really is completely different from what we see today. And I said kind of flip this the other way. Could mercantilism exist in today's society? I should see heads shaking no, right? Because do we have mass colonization today? I should see heads shaking no, right? Because what we have is a global economy. Does America trade with China on a regular basis? Yes, right? The shirt I'm wearing is probably from China, right? So that being said, you can't have the United States only depending on what goes on within the United States. You have to be in a global environment. So good connections there, and that's something that we'll continue to come back to as we see the growth of these colonies over the course of the next couple weeks. So at this point, we're going to take a look at some images from the lost colony of Roanoke, and I'm going to share my screen for just a second so you know where to navigate. So we're on the final part of the Chapter 1 module, Debris and White Painting Analysis. So if you want to pull that up. Directions are as follows. Examine the two images of Native Americans from Roanoke Island from the two different artists, and then respond to the questions. Be prepared to share out. So you'll see two different images there. You can type your responses directly on the sheet there, or you can just answer those in your notebook, whichever you prefer. I'm going to give you not quite about 10 minutes to examine those and address the questions, and then we'll pull back to share your observations. I'm going to stop share right now and then give you time to work. Do you have any questions? One clarifying question. Number 2, it will say do you think that DeBry consciously modified White's original? That just means, did he intentionally or purposely do that? All right, that should help you.